video, I'm going to see how many Christmas decorations I can make out of this drop cloth. So let's get right into it with drop cloth project number 1. Normally I end with my favorite project, but this time I'm going to start with my favorite project. And I didn't even need a pattern because the first thing I needed to do was cut out some Christmas tree shapes. And I'm going to cut out 3. I'm going to cut out 3 because one of my favorite books, and it's a children's book, is The Tale of Three Trees. You'll have to let me know, have you ever read that book? And having this perfectly cut out is not necessary because I'm going to fray all of the edges. And for all 3 trees, I'm going to use this Holly Jolly Hideaway decoupage paper by Redesign with Prima. Now, instead of having a torn edge or a rough edge around the design, I decide that I am going to do almost a fussy cut. And you know, a fussy cut is where you're very precise cutting out the pattern of whatever you're going to decoupage. Now, I just went just closely around, so I had a little bit of an edge. When I decoupage onto fabric, I always like to use a piece of plastic wrap to help me get the decoupage paper onto the fabric. Then I can take that whole piece of plastic wrap. It helps me, I can line it up, I can see where I'm going, because you really don't want to get the decoupage medium all over the fabric. Next, I'm going to take the Santa Helper tag stamps by Redesign with Prima. Now, I've never used these before, so the first thing I need to do is season the stamps. You don't have to do this for all stamps, but you do need to do it for the Redesign by Prima stamps and the IOD. And you only have to do this before you use them for the first time. And you just take a piece of sandpaper and just lightly go over the top of the stamp. And I always like to do a practice one first. And of course, it turned out perfect. But of course, this time I get ink on the block. So I just take a baby wipe and I remove the ink. I'm going to sew mine together because this is my kind of sewing project, but you could easily glue this. Now, before I take it to the sewing machine, I'm going to clip it together. I like to use the clips because I have dogs and I'm always worried about a stray needle. But I do use 2 needles because I need to mark where I'm going to start and stop sewing because I need to leave the opening for the stuffing. To stuff the tree, I'm using an inexpensive Walmart pillow. Now, you would think stuffing a pillow would be, you know, a no-brainer, but what I learned after doing 3 trees is that I end up redoing this because you need to stuff that point first because once you do it this way, I thought I could like push the stuffing up into the point. Well, you can't. So I ended up taking all the stuffing out and I made sure that the stuffing was nice and solid up there in the point because I wanted to make sure that that point would stand up at the top of the tree. And then I went in and I put in all the rest of the stuffing. And using that chopstick helped. And I want my edges frayed, so I'm taking the scissors and I'm just running across that edge to fray the fabric. This is tree number 2. Like I said before, I made 3 trees, but I'm not gonna go through the whole process on each tree because it's basically the same. I'm just gonna show you what I did differently. And on this one, I took a French script and I just stenciled it on different parts, and I only did this on the front of the tree. And on tree number 3, I had a stencil that I thought kind of resembled a snowflake, just a really fancy snowflake. And so I stenciled that onto the front of tree number 3. Now this is the one with the French script, and I'm going to use this angel. And I have this ruler with a jagged edge on it that gives you a nice, like, uniformed jagged edge. And I love to use it on decoupage paper. But you do have to have enough paper to be able to, like, grab it and tear it. And you're going to see here that in one section I don't, but this is how I make it work. And see, I have it on the wrong side. You can still get it to work. It's just not one clean swoop when you tear it off, but you just kind of keep picking at it and you get it to work. And here I'm just using my watercolor pen to dampen the paper so I can finally tear it off so I think it looks good. And then I decoupage it onto the tree the exact same way that I did the first one. For the base of my tree, I am using these wood rounds that I purchased from Hobby Lobby, and here I'm just trying to find the center so that I can drill a hole. I give them a quick sanding because they were pretty rough, and now I'm going to use the vinegar recipe to age the wood. You just take a jar, you put vinegar in it, and you put a piece of still wool in there, and I use the 4/0 still wool. I don't know if that matters. That's the one I use because that's the kind of still wool I have, and it always works. And here's what they look like a few hours later. It's kind of amazing the way it works. Now, the spindles that I'm using are too long, or they go through the hole too far, so I'm just marking here where I need to trim it. And I think in my last video I mentioned that I had bought this tool off of Amazon to cut styrofoam, but it is so sharp that I cut all my spindles using this tool. I just love this tool. Now, I don't love the color of the spindles with the wood base, so I give them the spindles a light sanding, and now I'm going to use a paint wash. I only needed to paint the bottom of the spindle because the top of the spindle is going to go up inside the tree. Even though the spindles fit tightly into the wood round, I still use some wood glue just to make sure they're not coming out. And here I'm just putting the tree over the spindle, and I'm going to close the bottom where I left the opening for the stuffing. And once I had the stuffing the way I liked it, this is how I closed it up, and I used hot glue. And here's how my 3 trees turned out. Now, the one thing I didn't show you was me adding the greenery at the bottom. And that's because at the last minute before she walked out the door with the trees, I thought they needed a little bit more. And I did this close up because I also added a little bit of the glitter spray, which it's not strong. You can only see it when you catch it in the light right. So you'll have to let me know what you think. Hopefully that means they're a good seller and they were easy so I can make more. In the next DIY, I am finally going to get to upcycle this sign. I tried before in a previous video, and this is where I was going. Didn't like it. So now I'm going to paint this sign. I'm going to dry brush it in a green. While that paint was drying, I took my drop cloth and I tore it to the right size to fit the front of the sign. Because I'm going to use this stencil by JRV Hot Cocoa for the front of my sign. And I'm just using craft paint, but I'm deepening up the color with a little dark brown in each of the colors. I'm using a piece of painter's tape to act as a hinge, so if I need to peek and see how my stenciling is going, I can look. I don't have 3 small stencil brushes, so I'm using these makeup sponges, but I'm offloading the paint just like I would if I was using a stencil brush. Now, I love a ruffle, and if I can find a place to add one, I'm going to do it. And I thought the sign was a perfect place to add a ruffle. And I had this Christmas fabric from a jelly roll that I had purchased off of Amazon, and it was just the right size for my ruffle. I used a craft needle and crochet thread, and I ruffled it by hand. I don't know why they call it a jelly roll or what a jelly roll is used for. I think it's quilting, but I purchased it because I got a variety of Christmas fabrics. But I only got 2 of each fabric, 2 strips of each fabric. So right here, I am making sure that this one strip will fit around half of my sign and still look ruffly. So it just takes me a minute to even out the ruffles, and it is going to work. And I was so happy that it worked, I forgot to turn on my camera. But I'll show you in 1 second after I make the second ruffle how I glued it down. I just worked in small sections and I used hot glue because it gave me just enough time to even out those ruffles before it dried. I love this transfer by Redesign with Prima. It has the most adorable little gingerbread items on there, and 2 of them look like cups of hot cocoa. So I added those to my sign. Now, it does take a minute to add a transfer to drop cloth, but you can easily do it. Adding that ruffle created a little recessed area in the front of the sign, so I filled that in with the warm and natural batting. And here's how my hot cocoa sign turned out. You'll have to let me know what you think. In the next DIY, I'm going to take this basket. I've inserted a picture because that is the color of the basket that I'm going to be working on. And I do not like that color. I want to give this basket some age. So I'm using the vinegar still wool solution. And this is what the basket looks like after a few hours. One good thing, it's easy to tell where you've missed. So I just go around, I reapply it until I'm happy with the way the basket looks. Now the next thing I did, I don't know if I recommend it. I got it to work 2 times, but both times I had my fingers crossed. What I did is I took a piece of drop cloth and I cut it to the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of copier paper. I taped it to the copier paper and then I ran it through my inkjet printer. And this is how it turned out. Now, I like the picture, but I don't like that that tree is not centered. So I'm going to add this piece of decoupage paper to just try to make this thing look a little more balanced. And I just used Mod Podge to decoupage it to the drop cloth. And here's where I'm cutting the copier paper from the drop cloth. When I remove the copier paper, you're going to see another piece of paper, and that is wax paper. I ironed that to the drop cloth first. I thought that might be heavy enough to go through the printer, but it wasn't. The drop cloth is too heavy for just wax paper. The picture I downloaded from Etsy, and then I uploaded it into Word, and then I sized it in Word so it was the right size for my basket. Now I'm just going to cut it out, and then I'll fray the edges. Next, I'm going to take the drop cloth and I'm going to size it to my basket. Now here is a good before picture of my basket before I used the vinegar solution. Once I get it sized, I want it to have a torn look, so I just take my scissors to start it, and then I tear the drop cloth to get it to the right size. And here I'm just using fabric tack glue to glue it to the drop cloth. With fabric tack glue, you have a little window of time so you can lift it up and readjust it to make sure it's straight. And next, this might be the hardest part of the basket, finding 4 matching buttons that I liked. And then I used crochet thread and I sewed on each of the buttons. Now I had an idea that if I left long tails in the back that I would be able to tie this to the front of the basket. Then I could reuse the basket, because if I glue it on, it's going to leave glue, you know, nubbies or whatever. But tying it on didn't work. I will show you what that looks like in a minute. So what I did is I got the removable glue dots, and I'm going to see if that works. So I don't know at this point of the video if that's going to work. So we'll see what happens. And to finish off the basket, I had a Christmas tree that I just stuffed in the basket. I stuffed some craft paper in the basket to take up most of the space. Then I added this long piece of garland to cover up the craft paper. I added a few more picks, a thrifted lantern, and here's how it turned out. And the removable dots are still holding, so it's gonna work. I'll be able to reuse this basket. For my next drop cloth project, I'm going to make bowl fillers. I'm also going to use some warm and natural cotton batting and some thrifted fabric. Now, to make it easy, I just used one of the squares on my cutting mat for the size of the bowl filler. And I cut, this is the warm and natural batting, cotton batting. I'm trying to utilize all of my drop cloth, so I have some odd shapes. So this time I'm just going to use my scissors and then I'll ravel the edges later. I printed these digital downloads off of Etsy and I'm going to use these for the front of my bowl fillers. I think they are so cute. And I'm going to decoupage them to the top fabric on my bowl fillers. Once the Mod Podge was dry, I was ready to assemble my little bowl fillers. Now I had 2 pieces of drop cloth. In between them, I put my cotton batting, and then I added a little bit of stuffing because I just wanted them to look more pillowy. That was the hard part, getting just the right amount of that stuffing in there. Then once I got it all together, I used clips to clip them all together so that I could take it to the sewing machine. Now I lost the footage of me sewing them together. The only thing you need to remember is you need to come in far enough from the edge with your stitch so that you catch all the fabric, and you'll see what I mean right here. See, I've sewn far enough in that I've caught all the fabrics, and this is the perfect beginner project. It does not have to be perfect, and you don't even have to sew in a straight line. It will just add to the charm of this primitive project. And here I'm just going around and I'm making sure that everything looks frayed. Now here I've made 2 more. I've made them a little bit larger, but this time I'm going to use transfers and I'm going to put it right onto the drop cloth. And I will not mislead you, it does take a little bit longer to put them on a drop cloth. Definitely doable, but you just need to take your time and know that it's going to take a minute. And you still want to take that carrier sheet and go over the transfer and make sure everything's down well. Now, when I assembled these, it went drop cloth, the batting, the cotton batting, then my Christmas fabric, and then on the top was the drop cloth with the transfer. And I sewed them together the exact same way, and here's how they turned out. I think I've mentioned in other videos that at Thanksgiving and Christmas time, I love to decorate primitive in my kitchen, and that's where these primitive ones will be going. For the next project, I need thin strips that I'm going to tear from the drop cloth and from my thrifted Christmas fabric. And then I used my craft iron because I need these little strips to lay flat. And we also need PVC pipe because we're going to make some candy canes. Now, I'm not showing you how I cut my PVC pipe because I think most people know how to cut PVC pipe by using like a hacksaw, but I got a new tool and it's called a multi-tool, I think, and I thought I would try it out cutting the PVC pipe in my craft room. And so you can see on my mat there under my elbow are 3 burn marks because the PVC pipe was heating up and it melted my mat. So, lesson learned. That wasn't a good idea. To start the candy canes, I'm just going to wrap the drop cloth around the PVC pipe. And I started at the top with some glue, with some hot glue, and then every, 2 or 3 turns, I add some more hot glue. And to finish it off, I just glued it down into the hole of the PVC pipe. Then I took the Christmas fabric and I did it the same way, of course leaving spaces to make it look like a candy cane. I made 2 more, so I had a total of 3, and here's how they turned out. Now I have some big fat PVC and I'm going to be making candy canes out of that next time. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have a favorite project. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask. I try to get to all the comments. And I have a lot of drop cloth left, so you may see some more Christmas projects. Thank you again for watching, and we will see you next time.